it still baffles me how in a lot of places there's no clearly defined process, or if there is a process, it's just not adhered to. It's not, the value of that knowledge share isn't truly understood. And I think if we take a step back and we think of all the interesting kind of nuggets of information that a sales individual extract during that kind of sales process, that is what the client's expectations are when it comes to what that partnership is going to result in. And we're just throwing it across the wall to a relatively maybe junior or uncoached CSM whose expectation is just to deliver. We really have to kind of ask ourselves as leaders, being like, are we looking at that kind of CS org as the same commercially obsessed way we do in our kind of post-sale?
Welcome to Revenue Insights. We're joined by revenue leaders from some of the highest growth companies. Together, we explore how they built their revenue teams, the journeys they've been on, and the lessons they've learned along the way. Revenue Insights is brought to you by Ebsta. We're an AI-first revenue intelligence platform designed to help you close more deals, retain more customers, and forecast better. Enjoy the podcast.
Hello, everybody. On today's episode of the Revenue Insights podcast, I'm thrilled to have Ben O'Mathuin, Principal Consultant at CustomerLift. Ben has spent his career helping SaaS companies fix churn, unlock expansion, and build scalable post-sales revenue engines. Ben takes a hands-on, diagnostic-first approach to designing commercial customer success systems that align teams, drive retention, and turn existing customers into predictable revenue growth levers. Ben has deep experience building go-to-market and customer success teams for VC-backed companies and is passionate about transforming customer success from a services function into a strategic growth driver. So, without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Ben.
Brilliant, Guy. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Ben, before we get started, perhaps you could tell our audience a little bit about what you focus on and really how you got there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose if we take all the way a step back, when I was fresh out of uni, I was very lucky to join a NASDAQ listed business that was in the MarTech space. And really I spent 6-7 years there where I kind of almost call it where I earned my stripes, right? What was very interesting about the period there, of course, I was in the CS org, but albeit a NASDAQ listed MarTech solution, product market fit at the time, although they had IPO'd, MarTech, as you may know, is an ever-changing landscape between breaking changes coming from publishers and, of course, increased competitors that our PMF started to slip. And I was very young and new in my career, and it really became, in order to retain customers and expand customers, not only did you need to know our own product very well, but you really needed to understand what value meant for that customer, which I think is something that was quite unique to experience quite early on in my career. So kind of took a massive amount of learnings from there. I left there to join a kind of early stage VC-backed business to build out the account management CS function, and did so quite well, where we kind of, grew that out to a team of 5 CSMs, engagement managers, solutions architects, and then ultimately stepped in to kind of own that full revenue function for them. So that was, again, kind of taking ownership of that full revenue suite from marketing all the way through to how we're retaining and expanding customers. And I suppose off the back of that, being involved in various different early stage companies, some were just peers and partners of mine that I was happy to give my time to, and then others who were kind of bringing me in, to my surprise, were willing to pay me for some of the advice I had, has led me now to kind of be the principal consultant at CustomerLift. So now working primarily with kind of seed scaling businesses who often might have their VP of sales in place, product market fit is just about there, but kind of the post-sale engine, that customer success function, is kind of like underlooked to a certain extent. And that's really my mission, is to take that same energy we often give to our sales and acquisition channel and really turn that post-sale ecosystem, that CS ecosystem, into, like I said, a revenue engine or a predictable engine.
It's funny. I don't meet that many CROs that started in customer success, so it's an interesting place to start from, and in a lot of ways, it makes a lot of sense, because a lot of VP sales spend their lives focusing on just get deals over the line, and rather than really focusing on what our ICP looks like and the lifetime value of a customer, and perhaps even how painful they are to support and service is also a big influence on whether it really matches our ICP. So I suppose it's coming from a unique perspective of owning the whole revenue engine at that early stage business when you started from a customer success perspective.
Absolutely. I think that's having spent most of my time on the CS side, we understand the pains of, unfortunately, our partners in sales sometimes selling when it's not the right fit, right? And that's often a result of, account executives and often sales leaders needing to hit target to the detriment of churn. And I think when you come at it with that full 360 view and are willing to say, sorry, Mr. Prospect or Mrs. Prospect, this is not the right fit, really gives the business that kind of ability to go, well, who is our ICP and how are we partnering with the right customers for long-term growth? And I think that's the fundamental part. I think once you crack that from a revenue perspective, you're in a pretty good space. But then what I'm really looking to do now is how can we take that customer success team and turn that into a revenue engine. And what I mean by that is we all know target account lists for our AEs. And are we really coaching our CSMs in the same way to be curious, to be inquisitive and understanding their book of business to turn that into an expansion opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, we did for the first time this year. We included customer success in the BT benchmark report, and what was amazing to see was over the last 12 months, we saw 52% of new revenue not come from new logos, but coming from existing accounts. And that I've never seen the number so high, and that was incredible. So it shows that investing in customer success and the customer experience is so important. The deal is just getting the deal over the line is really the first step, and the last.
Absolutely. And I think something I spend a lot of my time speaking to founders about is that time to value. And often in kind of that early stage or scale up period, if you ask different folks within the business, what is our time to value kind of milestones, you'll hear different pinpoints back. It's, when we get the data integrated, or, when they get access to the platform. And it's trying to coach, those internal teams to say time to value is when the customer realizes the value of why they're paying you guys as a partner. And not only that, but how we take that initial value and then compound that over the period of partnership.
Yeah, and I think sales have got a big job to do in actually stepping up and articulating exactly what value the customer's expecting before, as part of that handover. And I think perhaps success need to be a bit stronger in pushing back and not accepting every customer that signs if the sellers can't give them a clear understanding of what good looks like and how they're going to win with this customer.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like you mentioned handoff there. And it's one of the first things I'll ask for if I go in to support a business is, talk me through how you currently hand off between sales and CS. And it still baffles me how in a lot of places there's no clearly defined process, or if there is a process, it's just not adhered to. It's not, the value of that knowledge share isn't truly understood. And I think if we take a step back and we think of all the interesting kind of nuggets of information that a sales individual extracts during that kind of sales process, that is what the client's expectations are when it comes to what that partnership is going to result in. And we're just throwing it across the wall to a relatively maybe junior or uncoached CSM whose expectation is just to deliver. We really have to kind of ask ourselves as leaders, being like, are we looking at that kind of CS org as the same commercially obsessed way we do in our kind of post-sale?
No, fascinating. And one of the data points we saw in the latest report was that over 40% of businesses now had sellers taking an active role after the deals were signed. And that's relatively new. We all grew up in the world of Salesforce's model where we all have kind of these single purpose vehicles that hand off. But the problem with that is while it runs a really beautiful sales process, it doesn't really run a very clean, consistent buying process. And so for the buyer, they really want to build trust with a key contact, and to the point where the trust is so high they sign a contract. It seems crazy that we then stop, wash our hands of our engagement with our customers. So are you seeing more and more businesses allow the seller to take a continued role in the relationship with the customer moving forward?
Yeah, I am. And I also have mixed views on it, actually, as to what that should look like. Because I certainly think within, low ACV SaaS businesses where really the value is pretty clear, it's a transactional buy, maybe the seller isn't as, it's not as complex or an enterprise level sell as some of the larger enterprise deals where we're doing complex data integrations and so on. And I think on the lower ACV plug and play type solutions, I'm a real advocate of just just like sell it quickly and then understand what tech touch CS looks like and how that we're really optimizing for customer experience. I think where I'm seeing more value, of course, in having, what I often say is it's no longer sales and CS. Like we need to look at it as one single revenue org. And that becomes much more impactful and kind of true when we're talking about the larger enterprise solutions that have complex data integrations where value for customer A isn't always the same for value, for customer B. And I think that's where what I have done with some of my partners is we've looked at kind of pods where an individual seller will be partnered with an individual CSM and they work in tandem. And then there's, we could probably debate it for a long time on who owns the renewal and how should compensation plans be attributed to both those. But my starting point with any leader is we need to kind of break down the walls between the idea of pre and post sale. And we are one single revenue org. And ultimately, when we're knowledge sharing, we're bouncing ideas off each other. And really, CS have a lot of nuggets of information of how they're delivering value. And if we're not feeding that back to kind of boots on the ground sellers, ultimately, I think we're missing a trick.
Yeah, I absolutely buy into that. And what's amazing is when you go into these larger organizations and you ask the marketing team, the sales team, the success team, the partnerships team, now it's RevOps as well. You ask them about what ICP looks like and the types of organizations and deals that we should be doing. And it's crazy how often you get so many different answers to that question. And so aligning the teams is really vital. So are there any thoughts you've got or any ideas around how you kind of, have you got a step-by-step playbook for kind of connecting CS with RevOps and sales? Is there a journey or a playbook that you tend to use?
Yeah, it always starts with me with kind of philosophy and like a cultural movement within that organization where we start speaking about the collective of a revenue org. And even that simple change within a business of how we're no longer two departments. Yeah, maybe we are, but we're under one cohesive revenue org. That simple switch of language can start to have a compounding effect. Other very simple things I implement when I work at various different partners is to have a recurring revenue meeting where AEs will speak through their pipeline and talk about the challenges or blockers or whatever the case may be. And CSMs will talk about the upcoming renewals. And that's typically where the kind of revenue leader will cherry pick those that he or she wants to focus on. So we might have, 5 deals from new business and 5 deals from CS, and we discuss them as a revenue team. And what I find really interesting is when we start to understand, AE Bob, let's say, is working through this fintech op he has, and feels like it's going in the right direction. And the next thing you know, you've got a CSM popping up being like, oh, hey, I work with a client like that, and how we've delivered value for them is X, Y, and Z. And next thing you know, you've got ping pong going across of where CSMs are sharing internal case studies and that kind of nugget of information, and also vice versa, right? Where CSMs are maybe struggling with a renewal because we're seeing some shift or stakeholder leave, whatever the case is. You've got your AE saying, oh, I actually saw that deal. I know somebody else within the business. And I think small little things like that on a recurring basis to break down those silos and, like I said, really emphasize that one single revenue team is a very simple change within within the individual's week or month to bring that together that can have a compounding effect.
Yeah, I absolutely buy into that. I think marketing is part of that go-to-market team as well. And if we can... and partnerships and RevOps, right? We're all part of one unit. And if you can get it working as a single function, special things start to happen.
For sure. And you mentioned RevOps there as well, which I think is something that I emphasize more and more on the data. We enable our kind of business development team and our marketing team with so much data. And then often we overlook what our renewal pipelines and expansion opportunities and so on, which really we always have the data available to us, but often RevOps focus is on that net new business side. And again, a drum I'm always beating is we're one single revenue team, and let's make sure we're all getting the data we need to be able to optimize effectively.
Yeah, and I think leadership can be a problem as well. A lot of times we see leadership teams in a mindset where success is really just a retention safety gains, rather than a strategic growth lever that they can lean into. So can you talk us a little bit about what work you do with the leadership to help them understand that the opportunity with success and how important it is?
For me, when CS is a pure play retention team, I always question product as well. Because if CSMs are working their ass off to purely retain, we've got a little bit of a problem there. Whether that's missed expectations because our kind of our sellers are not equipping the customer for the reality or the expectation, or we've got some issues from a product perspective. And that's, I always will look at that first, and we have to diagnose and see what's going on, because for the most part, CS teams are incredibly powerful at what they do. They're incredibly passionate about solving problems for customers. But if they're purely scrambling to retain, to me, that's a larger issue with product market fit, ICP, and that really plays into that kind of GTM motion and products. Now, once we diagnose that and understand that, yeah, okay, our focus is on retention because we've never really had that conversation of expansion, or how we can kind of take that commercial acumen that we would have within a target account list on the new business side and enable our CSMs to do so. Well, that's a lovely problem to have, right? Because it just plays into all the stuff we know as kind of sales leaders, and we're kind of enabling our post-sale team to be just as commercially tight as our sellers.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But so how do you balance retention-focused metrics with expansion-focused metrics without creating that kind of internal conflict in the team?
Yeah, absolutely. So my philosophy is typically, despite having one single revenue function, there are individuals purely focused on net new business and that traditional AE model, who are partnered closely with their CSMs. And once that deal is done and it's onboarded, that CSM or account director, or whatever the case is, they are solely responsible for that partnership. And compensation plans are built specifically around like net revenue retention, and ultimately they're kind of incentivized to retain, but also hefty true ups for expansion. And that's where we look at, naturally that's inquisitive then from a CSM perspective, where you're going, okay, I'm going to retain this customer, but if I can expand a little bit here, the true up on my kind of comp plan is going to be quite considerable. So I really do see it that way, that it is still kind of very much two departments. And I know we could debate this a lot, because I know some folks are completely of the opposite opinion, but I do think that when sellers purely focus on selling, but have that close relationship to that post-sale team, and allow that CS folk to be able to look at that expansion and so on, really, because the CSM has the relationship. They're speaking to that customer on a regular cadence. They starting to understand the politics, the true nature of what's going on within that business behind the curtain. And I think often, a question I get is, should we hand off to the AE or to kind of sales to manage that expansion? And I think if we ask ourselves, well, who has more context today? It's more than likely the CSM who's speaking to them on a regular basis. The question is, are we willing to coach and train the commercial acumen to those CSMs? And I firmly believe that that is possible with the right RevOps, giving them the right data, giving them the right playbooks. We can have just as commercially powerful CSMs as we do AEs.
Okay. I'm going to respectfully disagree with that one, but that's okay. That's a healthy debate we can certainly jump into.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, let's talk a bit more about QBRs. So for me, a QBR has to be a strategic engagement with the customer. And I think one of the reasons perhaps that I don't agree with that previous statement is more often than not, the CSMs are much more tactical than strategic. They end up using QBRs as a way of talking about, training, or how buttons need to work, or, fixing a bug, or whatever it is, rather than a strategic conversation. And the challenge there, of course, is if the C-suite are not attending the QBRs, then you have no wood to power. And so we got to add value to the C-suite in those sessions. It's got to be a strategic session. It has to show them. You need to leave them with something they can take to their board, something they could use to articulate how they're going to run faster, or reduce costs, or be more efficient, whatever it is your thing does, right? And I think sometimes we make the mistake, or a lot of times I see CSN spending the time, in those kind of tactical weeds, rather than actually delivering value at the C-suite. And Um, any thoughts on how we could kind of raise up our CSMs?
Absolutely. No, I totally agree with that guy. And I think that's actually one of the real frustrations I have. And it's that us as leaders, I really feel like we're doing our CSMs a disservice in not enabling them and coaching them to be strategic. And you're absolutely right. The role of CS is to offer trainings and show them the buttons and so on. But an exceptional CSM and a good commercially focused post-sale team will understand when to dial up training versus dial up that strategic commercial conversation. And I think for them, again, it really depends on your ACVs and the nature of the business. For the most part, QBRs for me are pretty much redundant now, to be honest. I don't think sellers or buyers don't really want to be there. If they are, they're distracted, they're disengaged. And what I often focus on with kind of that post-sale team is a very simple question of, if your customer had to renew today, would they? And if you can't say yes or no, it's a binary, it's yes or no, then ask yourself why. And if that's because you haven't articulated value to C-suite in the last 3 to 4 weeks, then we're not commercially focused. We're not looking at that the strategic value that we're delivering to the account. And it's not about having a conversation with your C-suite on a monthly basis, right? That's never going to be the case. But it's understanding, how can we communicate in a way that's effective? And something I often kind of, for the most part, I've ditched QBRs, to be very transparent, because I think CSMs don't want to deliver them, and kind of C-suite don't want to join, but C-suite do want to understand, well, why am I paying you guys, and what is the value you're delivering? And often what I work on is a very simple 1 to 2 page executive summary as a PDF that can be worked with the kind of key and core stakeholder on client side. So it's worked in tandem with both CSM and that kind of day-to-day contact, looking at the value that we're delivering. And it's a polished document then that's shared on a monthly or quarterly basis to OpCo within client side to say, this is what you're paying us. This is the value that you're delivering. And often then what I'm kind of really pushing CS folks to do more and more is like manage up internally, right? So if you have this beautifully polished value statement that's like ready to go to C-suite on client side, why not paying your whether it be your VP of CS, whether it be your CEO, to kind of use that as an opportunity to say, CEO to CEO, this is the value that we're doing. And again, it's an easy thing to do for your C-suite internally, but also, will bang you the credit as well. It's a nice way to manage up and build your own personal brand within the business.
Yeah, I absolutely buy into that. In fact, we made that change internally. So we've recently sold the business. So Epster is now part of Forecast. But a year ago, we had this challenge, and we deliver huge amounts. Epster is a revenue intelligence platform. So really, we focus on how can we get more sellers hit quota. That's our big focus, that and forecast accuracy. And we deliver our whole customer experience inside Salesforce. That's kind of one of our USPs. The problem is that the C-suite don't go into Salesforce. So we're delivering all this value to their team, and they're all becoming a lot more consistent in the way they go to market. But the C-suite just had no visibility of that. And they were hearing good things, but it wasn't kind of front of mind for them. So we took a strategic approach to the QBRs, and we took all of the insights within our platform and invested in turning it into a kind of a very pretty kind of PDF where we are walking where we can walk the C-suite through it, effectively audit their whole go-to-market motion. So a really strategic session highlighting what's changed since last quarter, and if it was and what we would suggest they need to prioritize to get more of their seller seat quota to introduce that consistency. And it covers everything from top of funnel all the way to renewals, cross-sell, upsell. And what was fascinating was it was an absolute game changer. No, we weren't doing anything we weren't already doing. We were just taking that data and in a different format, and again, C-suite to C-suite, right? So, and each quarter, more of the C-levels turn up at the QBRs because they want that data. They're using it to educate their leaders and the managers and their sellers, but they're also using it at the board to help them understand where they need to invest more and where they need to invest less. And that strategic approach has transformed our business. And what we've now set that up as a standalone product we call RIAS, which is Revenue Insights as a Service. And it transformed our relationships with our customers. We now, all of our tier one accounts, we've got close relationships with the C-suite, and they lean into us as the subject matter expert. And it's a world of difference to the old QBRs where we were talking about training and buttons and features.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, because hey, who wants to show up to be told how to suck eggs, right? It's yeah.
Great. Well, I want to talk a bit more about bottlenecks, in
Mm.
particular around the way that customer success drives revenue. Do you see anything specific that time and time again is stopping and slowing down the CST to achieving their potential?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest gripes, we kind of touched on it, is that as sales leaders and revenue leaders, we kind of position CS in our mind as the team that just look after the customer. And they keep customers happy, and they teach them how to push the buttons and how the products really works. And I think there's a massive shift happening, and I think the true value of CS is becoming more realized every day. But I do think there's still a kind of in the as we're just going through the motions of general day to day in business, there's still that kind of sentiment within sales leaders. And I think if we can really start to make that shift a little bit more and start to ask ourselves, well, how can we stop having happy customers and turn them into valuable customers that are actually not just like, okay, that we might retain them, but are we using them as a referral engine? Like, is each valuable customer now generating pipeline for us? Because if it's not, again, we're missing a large component of it. So the bottleneck there I'm seeing is more just not enabling that CS function to have that commercial mindset or that strategic mindset. On top of that, I think additional bottlenecks will be the likes of getting the appropriate data. And that's kind of, again, plays into to RevOps. I think that's an area that is often underlooked, where again, feeding data massively to our new business function. Perhaps not a third bottleneck, but always a pillar I focus on is how CS holds so much information from customers, how they're using the platform, what value they're receiving from it. And often product teams are building features and functionality in silo. And I really see a bottleneck to growth is that often product teams are not listening enough and collaborating enough with those on the front lines day in, day out. And often CS are seen as a little bit as a thorn in product's ass, because often CS come looking for stuff, or we've got bugs to fix, and often we're perceived as perhaps the moany child within the organization. But when I see product teams and CS teams that collaborate incredibly well and really have a very commercially focused roadmap capacity and how they're building features and building functionality, that's not just enhancing product, it actually is a revenue enabler as well. So although maybe slightly complex to weave it within the organization, it is an area that I think is certainly bottlenecking growth.
Oh, it's great to hear. But have you got any specific examples where you've actually seen, by removing those bottlenecks, you've actually seen measurable growth or reduction in churn?
Yeah, absolutely. So, where I was a CRO and kind of built out that revenue function, we were in the marketing analytics space of a very kind of technical marketing product. And what the journey we went on when I had joined, product was definitely just been kind of built in silo, and we weren't really listening effectively to our customers. And what we heard from our customers when we really listened was, guys, we know theoretically what you're building, but we just don't understand how to use this, and what the onboarding of the data was incredibly complex, and so on. So the kind of core takeaway after really doing a lot of customer discovery and getting a lot of customer feedback was, your solution is cool but too complex. So we worked very closely with product and how we could just simplify the overall time to value and value delivery. So insights were being delivered not across 60 days of a time to value, but we reduced that all the way down to kind of 3 to 4 days, which is quite impressive from a product development perspective. And the result of that was that when, like, from a new business perspective, and we were saying, we're going to give you data in like 7 days. They're going, no, that's not possible. We're like, no, we've put so much energy into this that we saw our kind of close rate from pilot perspective increase kind of, 300-400%, because we could actually say, no, trust us, you're going to get this data quickly. And the wow factor was to be able to have a reference list of customers who had just got the data a couple of weeks back to go, would you mind just saying, yeah, you got the data, and we're not this complex solution that's going to take weeks and months to get you the output. That was compounding. Now, in transparency, the true value of that was still a little bit difficult post pilot, and I can speak to that in a little bit more detail. But that was one area where we decided if we can really, really optimize that integration, onboarding, and that initial data output, we will see an increase in close rates, and it certainly worked.
Oh, fantastic! I'll give you one of the stories that we lean into sometimes a lot. One of the data points we looked at a lot was, for those that are doing QBRs, the personas they're engaging with at the QBR and the impact that has on renewals or cross-sell, upsell. And what we saw was if the last 2 QBRs before the renewal are done at C-level, you're 7 times more likely to open up a cross-sell, upsell opportunity with a 45% win rate. But if your 2 QBRs before the renewal are done below the C-suite, you're 4 times more likely to churn the customer. And just knowing which personas are giving us that outcome means that we can really focus and incentivize the CS team to make sure they're engaging with the right personas within the accounts, and that leads to, it makes the renewal or the upsell opportunity just so much easier if you've got that relationship that's built up through the whole customer life cycle, rather than calling them out 6 weeks before the renewal and asking if they want to buy some more stuff.
Absolutely. And I think what I would add to that is often as well, I see particularly in early stage, founders like to spend more time on the new business side of the house because it's fun, it's sexy, we're hunting and we're looking for logos. And I just always encourage founders to split their time between net new business and also their current active customers. And they always will, that the instinct is, oh no, I do know my customers and so on. That's always true for the first period. But then as you start to scale and you've got a couple of CSMs and you've got a couple of AEs, we naturally tend to lean towards the new business side because, like I said, it's sexy, it's cool, and we're hunting new logos. But a mantra I always kind of will instill within that post-sale team is manage up to your leaders, whether that's a founding team, like I said, a VP CS or a CEO, because they should be equal owners of the partnership as you. Yes, the book stops with you from the broader part of the relationship, but really we should be managing up the best we can to ensure that, all stakeholders from an opco perspective on our side are equally as connected on client side.
Well, I love that. I'm now in this kind of scale-up mode with the new business that we've recently joined. And when I think about scaling companies, cultural alignment between customer success and sales is often overlooked. So how do you create that culture where CS is seen as a revenue partner, not just a services team?
Yeah, absolutely. I think step one, like I said, a few minutes ago, is around just the cultural component of we are one single revenue team, and it sounds very light and maybe a little bit fluffy, but there is something, and I've experienced it as an individual contributor, and then I've also kind of implemented it across a couple of businesses. Is that when you are sat there with your partners across marketing, sales, and CS, and you're kind of brought together. So you own revenue, you own different components of revenue, but each of that is of equal importance. It is that shift that starts to really, we no longer see each other as others, but as one. So I think, that's, albeit a very simple and light touch type of message, to instill that on a daily basis is not as easy, right? And I think it has to shift through all the different kind of layers of the business, and it needs to come all the way from opco down to individual contributors. And I think different layers within that, I think compensation plans need to be orientated towards that as well. And again, there's many ways to skin a cat, and there isn't one silver bullet. I think we're all still testing the right compensation plans to incentivize that one single kind of revenue org that is clear, is fair, and also unambiguous to the various different kind of stakeholders, because that can be complex. But yeah.
Have you seen a specific org change or a particular type of incentive that's helped to bring the team together as one unit?
Well, I can speak to my own experience as an individual contributor where we went through this, where we were a very complex, data-heavy solution where value for customer A wasn't always the same for value customer B. And we went from being a traditional sales to CS team to one single revenue owner. So if the traditional account director type role would often kind of traditionally found itself maybe in the agency world, where you sold it, you managed it. And that was enabled then through the different kind of support functions within CS. So there were kind of engagement managers and professional services to focus on the data and implementation side. But the commercial and strategic aspect was owned by one single individual. And I think that what that resulted in was this shift of what value really meant for that customer. And you almost became a Suedo expert in this type of customer that allowed you to then go and kind of prospect into very specific verticals or examples of verticals, because you had replicated this out for 2 or 3 very similar businesses. You knew what kind of data they had. You knew what time to value would look like. And I think that was a shift for me as an individual, going, the power of knowing a lot about a very niche space can be compounding from a new business perspective.
No, I love that. Really appreciate that. So just before we wind up, if you're a new founder or a CEO and you're focused on just one metric around CS, I'm going to be completely unreasonable now. Is there what would you say is the North Star metric that you're seeing everyone focus on? I mean, there's obviously there's NRR that we're hearing that is a big focus. What I've seen a lot recently is revenue per employee being a really interesting focus. Are you seeing a specific North Star metric that everyone's dialing into?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the honesty is I'm still trying to figure out the answer to that, because like there's so much. Is it NRR? Is it GRR? Is it revenue per employee? Honestly, for me, I think particularly early stage founders, you just got to keep it simple, right? And I think NRR is a number that works, and I think we need to kind of hold onto that. I think if you start overcomplicating it, it becomes too hard to measure, right? Particularly for early stage, right? If you don't have RevOps, if it's founder-led sales, you just need to be looking at what you have and are they staying with you. I think as businesses grow, we certainly do need to look at adding in additional kind of metrics around that, the guardrails, right? So that is the likes of gross revenue retention. So we're trying to find that leaky bucket, because often what I see is that like growth can hide churn. And I think that's really important, particularly for maybe first-time founders who think they're growing, because yes, they might be. And when we look at overall revenue, it's an upward trajectory. We really need to look into that leaky bucket and start to understand, actually, our customers just coming in and walking out the door. And I think that's an important metric to really hone in on.
Ben, we're out of time, but I've learned so much from today. Really appreciate your energy. If our audience wants to get in touch with you, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can find me on LinkedIn, Ben O'Mahon, or customerlift.co is where I kind of house a lot of my musings as well. So yeah, people can find me there.
Very good. And if they mention the podcast, I'm sure you'll accept the invite.
Oh, of course. Absolutely.
Very good. Ben, thank you so much for all your energy today. Again, we don't get the opportunity to spend much time strategically thinking about customer success as much as we should. So I really enjoyed this session, and I look forward to our paths crossing again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Appreciate
everyone.
Thanks for listening to Revenue Insights from Ebsta. If you want to learn more from some of the brightest minds on how to predictably and efficiently grow revenue, then subscribe to our newsletter. We'll deliver actionable insights straight to your inbox. Go to ebsta.com/newsletter. See you soon.